I mean, most of you are tax practitioners or maybe facing auditors only when if you are in a corporate, when somebody who comes once in a year or maybe once in a quarter to bother you with a list of requirements and then take you through a lot of painful questions. But we'll also explain you what is our responsibility, which makes us do that. So that's the objective, and also some printouts have been circulated. There might be some differences in the order and etc. here, the way I am presenting, but it's broadly the same presentation which will be running through. Another objective of giving you early was that you can probably spend 10-15 minutes, read it, and then we'll run a question answer on that. You want to do that way? Anyway, so we'll start our presentation. NBFC auditor's responsibility. My presentation would cover broadly what is an NBFC. What is auditor's roles and responsibility comes from several aspects. It is either an ICAI auditing standards and key considerations which we consider based on our experience in auditing specific audit areas, and our responsibility under the Companies Act, stock exchange listing agreements, and NBFC audit report, which is also an RBI directive which drives that, and the certification requirement which mainly comes from RBI, and FEMA requirements, which is an auditor's responsibility again. And lastly, we'll do a little update on what recently there has been a change in the prudential norms which requires us to view those loan assets and credit assets differently. You may ask your questions anytime. I have not really put a slide with a question mark saying that now the question answer session, but we will, you can ask anytime while I'm talking as well. Please raise your hand if you have any questions. Broadly, we would have understood what is an NBFC, and RBI has defined that basically an NBFC is an NBFC which is doing an NBFI activities and not doing non-NBFI activities. Broadly, if I were to interpret that definition, that's what it says. And NBFI activities are basically lending, buying and dealing in shares, and insurance, hire purchase, but does not include institution which has principal business as a agricultural activity. This principal business is a critical aspect. As we go on, we'll realize that every entities which we audit, we need to make sure that their principal business activity is not an NBFI activity. Otherwise, they are obligated to register. And auditors also have some responsibility in terms of assessing whether or not an entity is an NBFC, and accordingly, they will be obligated to give a certificate also. The 45(1)(a) requires the RBI Act that an entity should obtain a certificate of registration from RBI. Registration is compulsory for an NBFC entity. So once it's classified as an NBFC, an entity which is doing an NBFI. Broadly, the NBFCs are of different categories. Those are summarized here. Either it is an infrastructure finance company. These are dependent on what is the core business activity of an entity will drive the classification, and accordingly there are requirements for those business activities which RBI has laid down and which will be relevant for an entity to understand. Because at times, you know, like different entities which is doing a business which requires them to float a subsidiary as part of their business, and they have just nothing but their subsidiaries investments. Those become CIC, that's a classification. Entities which constantly make an investment and their financial asset for whatever reason becomes, larger than a 50%, there are the criteria given, becomes also an NBFC asset, and income both have to be exceeded. So those are the different things, and different microfinance will have that, again their business activities have to be relevant for those kind of activities. They are doing only financing with certain income group and maximum loan which they disburse. All that criteria, once it meets, it goes into that. And for entity to continue to meet those criteria, their business model should continue that way, and the asset positions as on the reporting date also should be in a similar manner. Otherwise, for that entity to continue in that category or as an NBFC also could be a challenge. And RBI views them very seriously. I mean, broadly, all of us know when does people go to NBFC? When either they don't have a bankable assets the assets which cannot be financed by bank, or they are not having assets which are matured enough for them to go to the bank, and that's why they are looking at an NBFC. NBFCs are also known for a lot of structured finance. I'm just spending 1 or 2 sentences more on this, just so that the later part is becoming more relevant when you do little boring stuff which is an auditing. So in terms of the businesses, they will continue to have those challenges, and they mainly NBFCs will lead into a structured finances, which may be not something which a bank would normally do. Bank might do a plain vanilla term loan, or the normal conversion clause, security, etc. NBFC might do a lot of unsecured stuff. They might do loan against shares. They might do different activities, which is the promoters finance. They will do a lot of transactions like warehousing or many things, which is quite different than what a bank would normally do as a project finance loans. Banks loans are generally a project finance loans, and so that business model drives a lot of consideration and gives a lot of responsibility to auditors when they engage themselves with those kind of entity and have responsibility to audit on that. This roles and responsibility will come mainly from understanding on different rules and regulations which enforce auditors' roles and responsibilities, which is accounting standard, the auditing standards, Companies Act, RBI directives, SEBI directives, and income tax. A lot of responsibilities are casted on auditors when they actually, under all these acts, all this regulation for them, when they get engaged themselves as an auditor. We'll go into some of this as we go along individual aspects of that. Companies Act, there is obviously straight away the opinion on financial statements. We'll discuss that in detail. Certification, the RBI master circulars and the other notifications. Report to the stock exchange under the listing agreement. And normally the NBFCs are known for raising debt money through a debt listing, debentures listing. So that's the reason clause 41 also. 29 becomes applicable to that. And NBFC auditors report to the board of directors of NBFC also becomes relevant because that's a specific responsibility casted under RBI prudential norms that an auditor of an NBFC will give a detailed report. We'll go on to some critical aspects of those reports when we go ahead. Moving on to the first aspect, which is an auditing standard. These are a kind of list of standards. I mean, we'll go into each one of them a little bit more to dwell on how we actually audit them. And how we include them in our approach, we kind of include them while we honor our responsibilities towards that. SA 250, which is on consideration of laws and regulations. This is the most important because in the current dynamic environment where our laws and regulations are changing every day. When as of the prudential norms for NBFC has been updated as of 7th of November, and the revised master circular has been issued, and they've given a kind of a staggered approach of moving on to a similar to a bank kind of a prudential norm on provisioning, which is also going to be a big challenge. Also, for the way they've approached now they are kind of especially systematically important NBFCs. RBI is viewing them like a bank. And they want to have the prudential norms and other rules applicable the way it applies to banks. They want the NBFC also to fall into that. Luckily, they've done it in a staged manner, and it doesn't hit like tomorrow the Basel II hitting bank, and banks are getting worried. Similarly, this is also a norm which NBFCs are worried about. In fact, when this regulation on SMA 012 when came in, also affected a lot of NBFCs in terms of the way they report, the way they have now considered, they have to file the papers. I mean, it becomes a little bit within that NBFC forum. Now they have to share their credit assets with other NBFCs. They have to pull all their obligations into one. A joint lenders forum has to be formed, and if those activities are not done, immediately a provisioning norm hits. So there is a lot of obligation to the NBFC and also auditors to understand and interpret this law and apply that to those NBFCs. Those are a continuous challenge which we have. In RBI guidelines, Companies Act, SEBI, income tax. Income tax will, I think there is a session in detail thereafter, but I will touch upon one or two aspects which we specifically include in our auditor's responsibility here. Dallas, I think you will discuss it in detail when we go there. So So various regulation which affect the NBFC or FMI is another one which is not listed here, but it's also affecting them because the capitalization norms and activities of NBFI activities are regulated once you have a foreign direct investment in your NBFC. NBFC's principal activities and principal business which are all auditors need to understand this based on the appropriate classification of NBFC, and that activities would drive the principal business criteria, which is what I briefly mentioned when I started my presentation. And that would drive this classification, and auditor need to understand what is the principal business activity and which NBFC classification will it fall into. So these are the broad categories, and there are different guidelines for each individual ones, and the guidelines gives, yes.
So I have a question here, the classification. At the time of COR and then you maintain the first audited balance sheet, let's say it is a loan company. But over a period of time, the next year the activity undergoes change and it becomes investment company. So the classification needs to be reported to RBI, or is this NBS server where you want to report and how it's like?
No, the classification has to be also reported to RBI, and you need to obtain a revised COR. Your regulatory matter, but my view is that you have to obtain revised COR.
Revised COR?
Yeah, because there are classification changes.
But this classification changes happens probably momentarily or whenever. So every time you approach that.
No, if it is it? Yeah, that's right. So if it is momentarily, like if you have all of a sudden an NBFC has done a finance lease, and that finance lease occupies a significant portion of the NBFC's balance sheet, and hence it becomes an asset finance company in that year. If that finance lease term is beyond a financial year, you would have, then your asset classification, your NBFC classification has changed, and accordingly you have to approach RBI. But so far as you are principally an NBFC and you are doing an NBFI activity, within an NBFI activity you have done an additional activity which changes the classification, I don't think RBI has a major issues. But if you are not doing an NBFI activity and you fall into the proportions, that is what is more serious versus this.
I think probably you agree with this. My concern was the loan and investment.
Loan and investment versus leasing. This is what quite often it happens, and you approach RBI, they will give you another certificate. So NBFCs has management also has been given a lot of responsibility, and we as an auditor normally are obligated to see whether the management has done their responsibility. They have to lay down an appropriate framework which will also drive, which is an operating procedures, which is an internal control compliance, which we generally understand as, but it is specifically a framework for sanctioning and disbursing loans. Has to be, the original sanction has gone to a one level, then the revision in this any terms and condition has to be done by a level higher than that. So those are the kind of an obligation on the management, but as an auditor, you would also, when you do the audit, your responsibility is to see whether that appropriate framework has been laid down and followed during the period of your audit. And they are obligated, now the current guidelines also require them to do framing a code of conduct, fair practice code, whistleblower, and all other regulations which has to be complied with, including the directors which are fit and proper, lot of criteria. Yeah. Lot of criteria has been laid down, and people have to make sure that they are complying with it. And one of the important thing which NBFC's management, I believe, I was told they are more than 50% from industry here, and they have done rightly so that they have actually sent their teams to understand the roles and duties and implication of rules and regulation which will affect NBFC here. So that's they should encourage them not only necessary to participate here, but also to read journals and other activities which will help you to upgrade yourself to the latest regulation which will. Auditors' responsibility will, the way auditors will actually understand this kind of environment is that through reading of minutes, regulatory returns, and then RBI inspection reports, any of the licensing conditions which are there, which has been complied with, not complied with, the understanding those, with the discussion with management, or those charged with governance. Those charged with governance is a kind of latest terms used for people who are a member of the board, audit committee, or risk management committee, etc. And specific reporting aspects, which are basically our RBI report to board, NBFC's board of directors report done by auditors. And also there is a responsibility of auditors where anything which is non-compliant in the prudential norm or any of the RBI norms, if auditor comes to know, auditor is obligated to report to RBI directly within 30 days. So even when you do, let's say capital adequacy is not complying with the norms, auditor is obligated to report to RBI that capital adequacy is not compliant. Concentration norms not complied with, immediately RBI auditor is obligated to report. Those are kind of important aspects which people at times have a difficulty, because you're reporting not to the management who has appointed you, but you're reporting to the regulator who is going to govern and come back and ask management for explanation on that. Planning is kind of most important aspect of the audit, and a well begun is half done. Well said words there. So if you have, when you do you're obligated to do a good planning to understand the terms of engagement, nature, timings of report, which are multiple reports. We'll go on to that in the subsequent slides. Applicable legal and statutory requirements, accounting policies, which is also very critical, because like the front end fees of loans, investments, debt securities also have a front end fee, unquoted equity shares and how are they getting valued, structured debenture, convertible instruments, etc. Debenture instruments having a redemption premium. So all those kind of different innovative instruments an NBFC will invest in the accounting policy, understanding of that, complying with the gap. And now when we are slowly moving towards an NBAS, we will have a lot of responsibility casted on auditors also. In addition to what management has a responsibility in preparation of the financial compliance. Auditors are also responsible for setting materiality level, which is kind of a critical level of the auditing standard, because if you don't fix your materiality, you're not going to do 100%. NBFC is having voluminous transactions, it's impossible for anybody. So materiality will help you to scope the engagement properly. And we have to identify the events and transactions which are critical as part of our planning, which are critical in the NBFC's business and will have a material impact on the financial statement to which we are being associated. And those transactions, how are they regulatorily affected, how are they accounting wise affected, how is the tax implication on those transactions. Those are the things which is very critical for one to understand and make sure that they are followed through. All the team members, everybody has to be having a lot of discussion on this critical aspects. Also on aspects of independence, because like independence rules not only equity shares but also doing any deposit or any other activity. None of the auditors can have any transaction of financial or any other nature with the NBFCs. Regulatory framework material we spoke about. Key business cycles are financing, borrowing, investment treasury. And importantly is related parties having a related party transaction. So now the companies is drawing a lot of importance on related party transactions. And planning of an NBFC audit becomes very, very critical, because NBFCs would not only do, they might have a securities company as a subsidiary, they might have a DP company as a subsidiary, they might do any other infra finance or other activities. All these activities they will normally do it through a subsidiary or any other activity, then they will actually become a kind of a related party. And NBFC having their core competencies of dealing with those bankers and other things who can get the critical financing of those entities, they do have a related party transactions in the nature of facilitating a lot of trades, etc. Nowadays the related party definitions are widened so much that even if the consideration is not received, it is a related party transaction.
Here all the related parties of the Companies Act perspective also will be applicable, right? All the relations.
Both 18 and Companies Act. In fact, nowadays, in terms of the RBI, the new governance guidelines, they are also widening and they are saying that they're syncing all the definitions which are there in the listing agreement, RBI, Companies Act and ASAE. We will see some notifications soon which will say that right now the Companies Act is wider than the ASAE, and Companies Act definitions will be relevant when RBI is concerned, which is the wider definition. Yes.
Auditor, if there is a stake kind of stake purchase of more than 20%, which is outside the group, that is planned between two financial years. Before March, I purchased about 15% stake, and the 5% stake I plan maybe April or May. As an auditor, how will you do it? Because if you say that 15% will not fall under group category, but my intention is to make it in the group. So whether for that, whether you will say if this is from that CIC perspective, so whether you will classify it as a CIC or you will report it to RBI or it's a gray area.
So let me just kind of rephrase the question. You're saying there is a CIC is making an investment into another entity, about 15% of the equity of that entity is getting acquired by the CIC, and there is a plan to acquire more. Is it a composite plan?
Yes. So you can say there is a
Composite plan to acquire a total of 20%.
Yes, but it is subject to certain conditions, so which
Right.
we may purchase, we may not purchase.
Right. But at the same time, does it give rise to any rights to influence on the company by appointing a share director
Maybe
or
once
nominate something?
Maybe once
So those are the things which will
Okay.
drive your explanation or justification for considering this as an associate when you invest 15%. 20% is rebuttable under accounting standard. So you will go by the definition of the Companies Act versus Companies Act. Accounting standard versus the Companies Act. An accounting standard allows you to consider an entity as an associate even when it is less than 20%.
That is possible if we
If the conditions of the significant influence and all those are met.
So what are those conditions, maybe while bringing the agreement or something?
Which is right to influence the policy and operating decision through appointment of director, right to participate and having a veto over certain financial and reporting policies. These are participative right also is permitted for significant influence. Like protective rights and a participative rights. There used to be a differentiation when the JV standard was first introduced.
So auditor has that power or veto to take that liberty.
Auditor, no, this is the auditor doesn't do the transaction.
Yeah, yes, yes.
Right. Auditor comes after the transaction is done, like it's post-mortem.
Yeah.
So after the dead body of balance sheet is created, auditor comes. But at the same time, when you're saying that transaction is done by the management could look at a structure by which they can include in the acquisition agreement parts which will drive that there is a management influence, and it can be classified as an associate in that manner. And then the CIC continues to make an investment of that money, and you make that disclosure accordingly.
Thank you.
Risk of material statement and risk associated with the financial statement is mainly the risk of material misstatement in the financial statement, and auditor's response to assessed risk is very critical. And if any of those questions are getting answered as yes, then you have a significant risk on your financial statement. So, like if there is an ineffective, is there an ineffective entity level controls? Entity level controls thrown at the top, who drives that this is what they want to influence, this is how they want to structure transactions. Risk identified as a fraud risk, anything which is identified as if there are any material weakness or deficiencies in the control environment. Are there any significant changes in the nature and volume of transactions, history of errors, which is based on auditor's experience. If you are a continuous auditor for multiple years, and if you have identified any errors continuously in a particular area. This is the second last bullet is very critical. a control is performed by incompetent person. This is a very qualitative judgment, and under SQC 1, there is an onerous responsibility casted on auditors to understand the control weakness by who performs that control. Is that person capable of performing control? In the next year's report, and the auditors have to give their internal financial control report, auditors will be obligated to analyze this and come back and to the management that this is a material weakness. Do you have a mitigating control for this? And how are you performing the mitigating control which prevents the error which we are suspecting? This is a very critical aspect, and when we get into SQC 1, it will be an important aspect for auditors to consider, and NBFC's management will respond also sometimes. Because auditors, NBFC management will always consider whoever is doing the work is the person who is capable of doing it. Whereas the auditor may come up with a different conclusion. Sometimes people will say the person who is doing is a chartered accountant, fair enough. But he's done hotel audit, hotel work, hotel financial reporting for all these years, and he has just been hired for NBFC work, and he's not been able to cope up with the activities, and he makes the errors, which are significant. Then, these are the examples, but you may come across a wider range of issues around this. The risk also comes from the general environment, which is arising out of the corruption, bribery. This is very critical nowadays. You see a lot of issues which are happening. You see in the market some of those commodities trades which are also financed by NBFCs and having issues on that. So there's always a continuous risk which is arising because from the general business conditions and broadly identified here. Tax disputes and litigations, I'll just make one mention here. The tax disputes and litigation for NBFCs arise mainly on two critical aspects. One is the structured transaction, and second is the 14A analysis, which is basically having an investments funded through a borrowed funds, directly or indirectly. So these are the two critical aspects, and the judgment on that and the way NBFC is taking a view on that and the provisions being created will be very critical. The whole interest expense getting disallowed when the interest there is no exempt income earned, or when there is an exempt income earned from those assets will be a critical analysis, and probably some part of that may get covered in the next session, which is the taxation. In terms of the NBFCs, increased NPAs because of the structured, restructured finance, and also a lot of responsibility on additional provisioning being casted on restructured assets. Then there is also diversion of funds and frauds around that, which will also be very critical. Liquidity risk, KYC, anti-money laundering issues, we have seen that in the past in banks, and we are expecting those stringent guidelines being now applicable to NBFC. There will be a lot of issues. Yeah. Revenue recognitions is a presumed fraud risk as per the auditing standard, and revenue recognition on a structured transaction entered by NBFC will always be considered as a risk. See, in the next slide we'll go through some of those, how we mitigate those risks, or what procedures do we perform to mitigate this risk. Valuation of derivatives, of course derivatives have been minimal in most of the NBFCs, but they are still there, and they will always have that. Management override of control is very critical. Some of the NBFCs promoted around. You will see that management has a bit of override on all the transactions, the way they want to account for it, the way they structure. They believe that when the money is received, it is an income. Though there is an obligation to render the services like an upfront fees on a syndication, upfront fees on a loan agreements, investments related upfront income, then a premium on upfront recovery, and then a redemption on a premium, subscription at discount, and premium at the redemption. Redemption premium they might want to account now, and discount they will not recognize, they will amortize over future. So those are the kind of typical revenue related items you will see there. As an auditor, our suggested mitigation steps are increased professional skepticism. This is a very much wider term. Increasing professional skepticism requires you to really introspect and see what the substance of the transaction is, and you will kind of you'll put in yourself into the shoes of of the promoter some time to understand the substance of the transaction, and then probably evaluate based on that what is the substance and what is the accounting standard applicability and how your income and expense should be recognized on those transactions. You have to continuously have a deep industry insight, because you will see a transactions of promoter equity funding through a debt, and then enforcement to pledge pledge shares to be enforced. Sometimes pledge shares are enforced at a fair market value. RBI have to come out with a guideline that when you actually enforce a pledge and which gives rise to a recovery of income, those shares have to be provided for, and those have to be brought to a book value. And RBI was forced to do that because NBFCs were doing so many such transactions. And there is a regular and conversation with the management and accounting, which actually reports into and deals with the customer to understand the substance of the transaction. Very critical. And you need to incorporate. There's some buzzword there. Incorporate unpredictability, because in your approach you have to be little more careful about what is unpredictable can also happen in your audit line, especially in an NBFC. Because like in the manufacturing, there are set processes. In NBFC, there are structured product, and anything can come to your surprise. There can be a side letter, there can be other communications which you may or may not be aware. So there are other audit procedures which you will go through, which will help you to get those substance of those transactions. Audit documentation. Yes.
If you touched upon this structuring and earlier also you spoke about the restructuring. I think as per the new guidelines, restructuring is looked into again as far as the NPA compliance and how so now this restructuring is basically a renewal of the loan which happens. How do we as an auditor have to look at from a perspective?
This is always a challenge when you come across asset which is now in NBFC is in the business of financing. It has an opportunity to lend to XYZ Limited at a yield of X, which is equal to market. It has an opportunity to renew that because the entity continues to need the finance which it originally took it, maybe for a year or a year and a half. And now they want it to be extended further because obviously the underlying transactions and other things which they were expecting has not happened, and they want to extend this term. Now, it is an NBFC who has to see whether it is actually a rollover or a restructuring. It's a very critical thin line, and they have to, based on the document which you will see in terms of the credit approval, because if you are actually doing a rollover, it's as good as giving a new loan to that entity. And are you going through the same rigor of a credit approval process? Then you have an argument to say that probably it's a new finance, new loan which has been done, versus your documentation suggests, and also your terms of negotiation with them suggest that actually is unable to pay. Hence you are extending the terms of repayment, would be a restructuring. It's a very thin line. You can argue both the sides, and RBI inspectors also argue on both the sides. You will run into a difficulty in the cases which the assets are actually having a larger name in the media for their defaults.
So that's why as a auditor, when we have to take the kind of conservative view or taking into even client side also.
So you would question whether the interest is serviced, whether the security has a value which the cover which it was required.
So all these parameters are not met, you have to take the...
Yeah, you will take the contrary view, a conservative view, a stricter view, whatever. Audit documentation, it is in our audit, we always say that not documented, not done. So if we have, in olden days we used to keep a lot of things in our brain, and when an audit senior or manager, director, partner, whoever reviewing the work of a field senior, everything is explained by the person who has done it. He may not have written it down anything. He might show actually a good fine printout which is actually a client's ledger or a client schedule which gives you a list of loans. Oh, this is the loan statement. Tallied, footed, agreed with the travelers. But what have you done on this? So this loan is to this group, and he will explain. In olden days, people used to just go ahead, file that paper in the audit file, and go ahead. But nowadays you are expected to document what have you tested, why have you tested only that, what is the methodology of selection of samples, why that is the most appropriate methodology to give you an adequate coverage, document that as well. After you have documented that, you will write down what is the actual sample selected, what is the work done on the sample, and what is the actually outcome, observations arising from the verification. To whom have you discussed that? Is there anything out of this which you want to escalate further? And does it affect anything in terms of the DNI, design and implementation of controls? Does it affect anything in terms of the control weaknesses which you have identified? Does it affect anything which is significant as a process which the company is following? And in overall, it gives rise to an ultimate conclusion: the controls are effective throughout the period of reliance. This is very critical, and this will now, when next year, when an entity's auditor is expected to give a report on internal control as well, will become more and more relevant, this kind of documentation, which will support all the assertion which auditor has made in this. Up till now, we were always talking about assertions made by the management, and do they have any backup for that? But auditors also have to, because current environment requires auditors to constantly have the backup of whatever they've done and whatever they have asserted in the report. SQC1 is the critical quality control standard which has been adopted by the Institute of Chartered Accountants. External confirmations is one of the important evidence which an auditor is responsible to perform this procedure and get those confirmations. This might be, why it is relevant? It's because we might, it is other than the party who you are auditing, is an independent party who is confirming to you, and it's a documentary evidence obtained from third party directly by the auditor to ensure that the account balance is what it is stated in the financial statements. It is done mainly in case of advances, deposits. Legal case is very critical. We have to send this out and make sure that you get what are the quantum of legal cases outstanding, or why does the management believe that the likelihood of this case is dwelling on the company, and what is the probability. All that has to be really assessed through an external confirmation. Borrowing, treasury. Another area where you get a confirmation is for structured deals. At times, based on the agreement which you understand, you do not necessarily get the full idea of the transaction. For you to get a full idea of the transaction, you might send out a confirmation with them to understand all aspects. Is there a put option? Is there a call option anywhere in the transaction which will affect the accounting the way you are doing? This is very critical. And then accordingly your financial statement should reflect. Also, there is a lot of responsibility on disclosure of derivatives. Call and put options becomes one of the derivatives which has to be disclosed. This is again more from the auditing side. Ensure that population size is correct. Design the confirmation method and template, which is very critical depending on the type of balances which you are confirming. Debtors, creditors, loans, borrowings, treasury, demat statement, legal confirmation, everything. Everything will have a different format in which you will get it, so that you achieve the objective by which you are going to get it. Once you get a confirmation, you get a reliance on the balance, and that objective has to be achieved. Analytical procedures, this is very critical when you do an audit of an NBFC, and the critical analytical factors which we use is net interest margin. One of them when it is more dependent on an interest income as an NBFC. Capital adequacy ratio, very critical. Loan to value ratio, when they are doing the secured unsecured combination of those loans, and that will drive the percentages of the provision which one has to create. Earning per share, very critical, which is there, probably you might use it in non-NBFC as well. Provision coverage ratio is also one of the critical for banks, and also it is becoming relevant for NBFCs. So what is the provision as percentage of the total NPA? So if they withheld 50% of the NPA as a provision, or 30%. Depending on the prudential norm, they will do it, and NBFCs also take a call on making an aggressive provision. In addition to the prudential norm, they do make a provision additional. So that is why this provision coverage ratio becomes more relevant. gross and net NPA ratios and return on assets, which I think which we usually remain. Fraud, of course, is very critical, and this is what former chairman of Federal Reserve mentioned, that the human nature is such, whether we like it or not, we have frauds in our environment. Only action which we can take is that we can't eliminate that completely, but only action which we can take is that minimize it. So, I mean, while doing the audit, you will always come across transactions which one has to consider that they are not in the nature of the fraud on the company or by the company. Companies Act, RBI Master Circular, and guidance note on reporting on fraud, and the 14312. These are the institute guidance available for us to consider the fraud while auditing the NBFCs. Broad classifications are because of misappropriations, encashment, fraudulent encashment, unauthorized credits, negligence, cheating, irregularity, any type of fraud could be in our NBFC. The kind of which generally people would have seen. And in 14312, in the course of performance of an audit, if any auditor come across fraud, there is an obligation to report. And also there is a direct reporting responsibility to RBI in case of any serious irregularities. So RBI has used the word serious irregularities, losses of fraud. Fraud is maybe a wider definition, serious irregularity is probably a little narrow definition compared to the fraud.
Any insight on how to represent in the report?
Any insight on?
Representing the fraud.
So right now we have an obligation to report on a fraud under CARO. Last clause in the CARO talks about reporting obligation of an auditor on fraud on or by the company. So that now it is expanded further and brought it into our report. And because it is included in 143 now, people are now, and the institute has also issued a guidance note on that. This is for communicating to those charged with governance, basically an audit committee. There is also obligation under Master Circular to report by auditor of the NBFC to report on the significant matters, which will go to in little detail later. And any non-compliance has to be reported to all those who are charged with governance, including the management, audit committee, risk management committee, etc. And this summarizes the key considerations, sums up from the all auditing standards basically, that we develop an understanding of NBFC, specific attention to internal control, issues which require specific attention, maybe a structured transaction which is unusual for that entity, and continuously incorporate that, controls around that, and build that into your audit scope. Risk assessment procedures, and obtaining appropriate audit evidence to mitigate those risks, thorough knowledge to be gained by process walkthrough of all the transactions in the cycle. Consider the fraud and error in consideration of laws and regulations. These are basically and sums up everything which we discussed in the auditing standards. This is kind of summarizing the two specific areas which we are talking about, lending and investment. And these are the most critical one. And just kind of for the benefit of the audience here, summed up what you normally consider of your selection criteria as key consideration and what your verification procedures are when you perform your audit on these two cycles. In loans, of course, there is one important aspect where there is a responsibility which is casted on auditor is the loss asset. Loss asset is a loss asset which is considered by internal, external auditor or the management or RBI. So external auditor included. So if you are performing a statutory audit of a NBFC, it is your obligation as well to identify loss asset if any. And one of the examples given is a complete loss of security.
In terms of risk, which you touched upon earlier, like banks where you have to give us the norm in NBFC, do you see there's no mandatory thing right now it is given?
It might come up for a systematically important person.
So especially right now for a credit mixer of inspection, do you see any disclosure which is not mandatory?
You can make a voluntary disclosures on that, depending on the business model which one NBFC is following. An NBFC is having a predominant asset which are linked to credit and their ability to connect with an interest rate which is regularly monitored by RBI. RBI announcing their lending rates, prime lending rate cards, etc., and their business getting affected on that. Some NBFCs which are doing only lending to real estate and other things, their business may not necessarily get affected by that.
Especially those who are credit rated.
Yeah, those who are credit rated will be more obligated to disclose that, and that information is available when they have submitted to credit rated guys also. But this has to be more general in nature, but customized for that entity. Investments, of course, when I mentioned about by acquired because of the enforcement of pledge by for recovery of dues or income, there are different guidelines one has to be cognizant of that. And the classification is long-term and current. At the time of purchase, will drive the accounting intent. And especially nowadays, NBFC is having a lot of unquoted shares. So unquoted shares will be always a challenge. How do you view that? Again, question which he asked on whether it is having a significant influence. Because you might have only 10%, but you still have a significant influence. You constantly evaluate those aspects.
Here accounting standard 13 would be the
13 is the accounting standard which you have like. That's right. The highlighted one paragraphs here to state are the auditor's responsibility and the Companies Act, and what is the new thing which is coming under that.
I have one question. Investment by an NBFC in the structured investment, how will we quote it? Same way quoted, unquoted, or long
Quoted, unquoted, long-term, current. And so far as it is a credit substitutes, you will consider it for standard security. 143.3 has some of those specific things which is coming as an auditor's obligation, which is just highlighted here. Observations and comments on auditors on financial transactions or matters that have adverse effect on the company. If you sell your investment at a huge loss, it has an adverse effect. Are you obligated to comment? If it is an NBFC, it is in the business of buying and selling investments. So there will be a challenge for an auditor to report in this aspect. The auditor may want to report, and at the same time, management may not want you to highlight that. Company, whether the company has adequate internal financial control in place and operating effectively, that's also another new requirement coming in. Whether the company has disclosed impact of any pending litigation in the financial statement. This also comes in our main report, which was there earlier in the CARO, but this is actually impact of any pending litigation. So what is that impact of the pending litigation? Which is nothing broadly but a contingent liability which is being disclosed. That possibly if the company loses the argument with the regulator, this is the damage which it has to pay. If they made any provision in respect of material foreseeable losses in respect of our derivatives. This is also a very critical one, and if you are in the business of doing this, and you might have a foreseeable loss as well on a derivatives, they have to be marked to market, and the losses have to be provided as per the current gap. You will always have a challenge in when you report in an NBFC, whether because they are in the business of entering into such financial instruments as their regular activity. It gets highlighted in the report for one transaction or for all the much of transaction. And it will probably institute will issue more guidance on this and for members to follow. This is on Caro and these are broadly the clauses which are there. Fixed asset. I mean, I'm not going to go through detail this one because.
But the earlier one, AS 3031, which was like there was a lot of
Financial instrument, yeah, equivalent to IS 29.
So how would
39, sorry.
is RBI utilize this case, especially on cases of structured
No, 30, 31 and because internationally, this might be a little off track, but I'll, for the benefit of everybody here, RBI is currently looking at a new standard which an IFRS has introduced called IFRS 9. And that is the reason an IFRS 9 is getting implemented FY17 onwards in the global world. So probably that is one of the reasons why RBI is still evaluating for roadmap for application of Ind AS to NBFCs or an RBI regulated entities and insurance companies separately. They might delay it by considering that or should we do it parallel to or 1 year before the international world is adopting a standard? Can we adopt it before them or should we adopt it after their experience? Because IS 39 when implemented was also creating a lot of challenges and people had issues around that. That is why the standard has been modified. So currently there is some deliberations and probably more to be known once they make it in public domain. But consideration is given on IFRS 910, which is more stabilized standard versus IS 39. And it goes through a business model consideration.
So what I remember is when it is written to RBI also there was no clear clarification given that should we be adopting AS 3031.
Yeah. And right now that is the reason they have not given any guidelines further that we are adopting 3031. 3031 has been selectively adopted by the normal non-NBFC companies for doing their hedging.
Only
Right? So highly probable hedging transaction not covered by AS 11, they did that. And that's why there was a recent amendment also made in that standard.
What impact is whether the company has made delay transferring the amount required to be transferred to the investor relation and protection by the company?
So which was there earlier in the, now it is brought into the auditor's report. Earlier it was there only in the Schedule 6. There's a separate line item in the financial statement format presentation. That if there is an amount which is overdue for investor education and fund,
All companies are covered.
all companies are covered. This is not specifically for NBFCs.
All companies.
All companies are covered.
Earlier, transferring and repeating.
Oh, that under the law I think it's 7 years. Acceptance of deposit, compliance with RBI rules and nature of contraventions to be reported here, and undisputed and disputed statutory dues to be reported. For companies making losses, again, these are the latest announcement in Caro, which we are still awaiting notification in the Gazette, and then we'll apply that in 31st March 15 report. But this is the Caro which has been just been announced. And these are the clauses which were deleted out of 21 now. In terms of the reporting obligation under clause 41 and 49, compliance with an RBI guidelines and other recognized principles is a specific line added for NBFCs, which an auditor is obligated to report on. This is the only thing which is specific for an NBFC in the clause 41 and 29.
So the new auditor's report has been notified and published.
ICI has been notified, but we are going to get, the main report has been notified by ICI.
I'm talking about the independent auditor report.
Independent auditor's report, there is, well, as we have understood, it is in two parts, main report and a card.
Correct, yeah.
So, main report has been notified by ICI, and that is what is
So it
being.
talks about now standalone companies and then vertical company and the investor protection for housing
Yes,
costs.
and also specifically views on those matters which I just mentioned.
So it still refers to this as 370 standard auditing under which it was earlier.
I don't remember that offhand, but
Yeah.
yeah. But these are the matters which now specifically they drafted a language, and ICI has given multiple variants of report, which we see modified report, a standard report, a report which has a comment on a statutory dues, which has a material impact, pending litigation which has impact on the financial statement. What is the report which one was to give? There are different drafts released by ICI. This is on Karo. Now this is a long report which is given by an auditor of an NBFC to the board of director of NBFC, and which requires an auditor to comment specifically whether or not the company is accepting deposit, what is the are they entitled to continue to hold a COR, or the question which you asked. That is also to be commented based on an asset income proportion. So asset income proportion has changed accordingly, that will get reported here. Then whether or not NBFC has been correctly classified as an asset finance company or a loan and investment company. Are they correctly classified as per MFI? What is the classification, and have been correctly classified based on the requirement of the business? Are they accepting deposit from public? Then there are requirements accordingly that those have to be complied with. Any excess deposit taken more than the permitted limits, what is the excess thereon, that's also an auditor's obligation. Auditors are again obligated to comment on the capital adequacy ratios, whether they are correctly computed and they have been compiled within the range which is permitted by RBI. What is the credit rating which the company has got, and that has to be repeated here, and deposit outstanding, defaulting paying to depositors. They have complied with the prudential norm. There is a specific assertion to be made here by the auditors to that report. Capital adequacy ratio, again for the people who have a non-accepting deposit also. And have they filed their regular return, half-yearly return with an RBI? And have they opened any new branches or closed any of the branches? These are all specific reporting obligation of the auditors to the board of directors. And when the NBFC is not accepting deposit, they have to pass a specific resolution. And that has to be reported by the auditor in the long report, which reports that the board has passed resolution. And whenever there is any exception in any of the report, auditor is obligated to report the exception separately to RBI. These are the other certification which an auditor is required. There is an annual certification on continuation of business, and there is an NBFI. FDI certificate from 30 days from the year end. Then compliance with the statement of capital funds and risk-weighted assets in the RBI return. Then certificate on a regulatory framework. Application for certificate of registration, again there is an auditor certificate required. And CIC, an online CAPITE certificate on that as well. CIC have to have 90% of assets in use. This is basically, we're going to have a little more update from you, on how is it going to pan out for an NBFC in a time to come for the NPA norms. It is going to be 5 months for next year overdue, 4 months for 17 and 3 months for 18. So by 18 it will be at par with bank. Similarly, they have reduced the term for each one of them. The lease rental used to be 18 months. 12 months earlier. Now it is reduced to 9 next year, 6, and then 3. Again, substandard effectively. Everywhere they are bringing it in line with the banks, essentially. And for all these things, if they do a one-time adjustment on a repayment schedule of an existing loans, it will not be construed as a restructure. First April 16. For financial year, this is what will apply. So 1st April 15 to 31st March 16. That's the first financial year where the NPA will be measured on a 5-month basis. I would take it as a 5 months. But it's more of a regulator. You can ask the regulator because as it is more than 30 days onward, you are anyway reporting SMS. It says financial year ending, so it doesn't say. That could be one of the view which you can take. But as of now, I don't. To the NBFCs which I have interacted, I wouldn't take a view. 1st April 2015 onwards, they'll take a 5 days as an NPA. 5 months as an NPA. But that's also another view which you are also saying. Is a view which is being floating in the. I have not heard anything from the regulator directly. It says differently. Or says anything definitively on one view. So prudential norm to be complied by NBFCs, plus also now the revised regulation says that non-deposit taking with asset size less than 500 crore, not assessing public funds or non-customer interest, not subjected to any prudential or any other business regulation for fair practice code or so they've kind of set up a materiality regulator. They're going to be giving a specific exemption there. And only business regulations and all those non-deposit taking will be the asset size of less than 500 crores will have those kind of different rules. All NBFCs have to get registered mandatorily. And all NBFCs non-deposit taking with asset size of less than 500 crores without any customer interface, however having public funds, accessing public funds, will be obligated to comply with the prudential norms. They've kind of differentiated who will be more affected by prudential norms and who will not be. I think this is just an update, and also capital ratios have been now, March 16 is going to be for non-deposit taking systematically important is going to be Tier 1 8.5 by 16 and 10% by March 17. By the capital adequacy ratio definition, I think you can go back to so I mean the one interpretation one could take based on a capital adequacy ratio which is going to be applicable for FY16, which is also referring to March 16 date. You may take a view that the NPA also applies when you first time classify NPA on March 16. On March 16, when you classify NPA, you have to take 5 months as an overdue. So I had a discussion on the capital adequacy ratio separately, which said March 16. So probably all these rules will be, should apply accordingly.
Nobody stops you doing that.
Yeah. No, there are NBFCs who are actually doing a different provisioning. More than 3 months, they start providing 5%, 6%, 7%, and then when it hits 6 months, then they start creating full provision of 10%, so that it doesn't hit. And also, if there is a continuous pressure on the marketing team for them to make sure that they recover the dues, because the marketing's performance is dependent on net NPAs. there are NBFCs who follow differently. There are NBFCs who also create a contingency provision against standard asset, more than the standard asset provisioning which is required under RBI rules. Earlier there was no such disclosure, but now there is a disclosure on registration. The sector in which they apply, rating, penalties, countries of operations, joint ventures, asset liability profile, NPAs and CRR. These are all now kind of a specific disclosure requirement. It is not clear that this disclosure will be there as part of the financial statement, or it will be kind of a separate annexure to the financials as an additional information. But companies are following a varied practice. Most of the companies are following as an annexure to the financial annual report. So if this doesn't go as part of the disclosure to someone else who just gets an annual financial statement annually. Also disclosure on derivative, securitization, asset liability management, maturity pattern, exposure to real estate and capital market. This has been always a concern for RBI. They've been asking them to make sure that they're maintaining within the range. And remuneration to director, this being another disclosure. So the broadly points which I could summarize in auditor's responsibility. If there are more questions, we can discuss further.
What is the root state and local state government levels? Like in your microfinance, Andhra Pradesh, the ban on recollection of the funds. And the whole microfinance company and the groups went first. And do I provide for it on a wholesale basis?
No, if it is a change in the prudential law.
So it is changed by the state, not by the RBI, neither by the state.
That's right. So then you may take a different view on that. If it is a change by a state and it is a change in the regulation, you are obligated to comply with the regulation. Number one.
To that state, lending in that state.
Right. Anything pertaining to lending in that state and the state has given a guideline, you are obligated to comply with that. Laws and regulation is mandatory. But one can take a view as a management while preparing the financial statement that they are creating provisions in accordance with the prudential norms laid down by RBI, much more superior authority on this subject. And accordingly, that provision is adequate.
I may correct, I may not correct. Rules, the state government rules may change, may not change. Depending on the population and the regulation given, all that other related. And what happens? I'm not able to collect the money.
If your judgment is that you will not be able to collect the money, you will have to provide.
That is correct.
Any other question or shall I wind up? Thank you, Parvez ji. I request Ashok to give his hands the order.